The story of Jesus and Nicodemus. In the hushed stillness of Jerusalem at night, when the stones of the ancient city walls glowed silver in the moonlight, a solitary figure moved through the quiet streets. His footsteps were careful and measured, echoing softly against the worn stones as he made his way through the sleeping city. This was Nicodemus, a respected member of the Sanhedrin, a teacher of Israel whose heart was stirred with questions that would not let him rest. The evening air carried the lingering warmth of the day, mixed with the sweet fragrance of night-blooming jasmine that cascaded down the city walls. Stars scattered across the dark canvas of the sky like diamonds on velvet, their light casting gentle shadows in the narrow streets. The peaceful sounds of night in Jerusalem surrounded him, the distant call of night birds, the soft rustle of palm fronds in the evening breeze. Nicodemus had heard much about Jesus in recent days. Stories of his teachings and the signs he had performed circulated through the city like whispers on the wind. As a scholar and seeker of truth, Nicodemus felt drawn to understand more, though something held him back from approaching Jesus in the light of day. Perhaps it was the weight of his position, or the delicate balance of politics and faith that he navigated daily. He knew where to find Jesus, having quietly inquired about his whereabouts. The house where Jesus stayed was modest, its entrance marked by a simple oil lamp that cast a warm glow into the night. As Nicodemus approached, his heart beat with a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. He was a man accustomed to having answers, yet here he was, seeking understanding in the quiet hours of night. The soft light from the doorway spilled onto the street, creating a peaceful pool of illumination. Inside, Jesus sat with several of his disciples, their quiet conversation carrying the gentle rhythm of evening discussion. The atmosphere was one of tranquil contemplation, as if the night itself had created a sacred space for what was to come. Nicodemus paused at the threshold, his scholarly robes casting long shadows in the lamplight. Jesus looked up with gentle acknowledgement, his eyes holding a warmth that seemed to welcome questions yet unspoken. The disciples respectfully drew back, creating a space of quiet intimacy in the modest room. The oil lamps flickered softly, their light dancing on the walls like gentle thoughts taking shape. "My teacher," Nicodemus began, his voice carrying the humility of one who had spent a lifetime learning, yet now found himself beginning anew. The words flowed from him like water from a spring, speaking of the signs he had seen, of the understanding that Jesus must have come from God. His voice held the quiet wonder of discovery, like someone describing the first light of dawn. Jesus listened with peaceful attention, his presence as calming as the night air that drifted through the window. The room held a sacred stillness, broken only by the soft sound of their voices and the distant calls of night birds. When Jesus spoke, his words carried both gentleness and depth, like stones dropping into still water, creating ripples of understanding that moved outward in ever-widening circles. "Unless one is born again," Jesus said, his voice as soft as the evening breeze, "one cannot see the kingdom of God." The words hung in the air like stars in the night sky, both beautiful and mysterious. Nicodemus leaned forward slightly, his face showing the careful consideration of a scholar encountering something both familiar and completely new. The night deepened around them as they spoke, the cool air carrying the scent of cedar and olive wood. The flames of the oil lamps cast warm shadows that seemed to dance with the rhythm of their conversation. In this peaceful setting, profound truths were being shared as naturally as breath, as gently as moonlight touching the earth. Nicodemus pondered these words with the quietness of deep thought. How can one be born when they are old? He wondered aloud, his voice carrying no challenge, but rather a genuine seeking. The question floated in the peaceful air between them, like a leaf drifting on still water. The lamplight caught the silver in his beard as he tilted his head in contemplation. Jesus' response came with the gentleness of evening dew. He spoke of being born of water and spirit, his words painting pictures of things seen and unseen. The wind blows where it wishes, he explained, his voice soft and measured. You hear its sound, but you do not know where it comes from or where it goes. So it is with everyone born of the Spirit. The night air seemed to stir at these words, as if in quiet agreement. Through the window, the branches of an olive tree swayed gently, its leaves whispering their own peaceful testimony. Nicodemus sat in thoughtful silence, his hands folded in his lap, his eyes reflecting the warm glow of the lamps as he absorbed these new ideas. Jesus continued, his voice carrying the warmth of compassion. He spoke of heavenly things with earthly metaphors, making the divine accessible through images of the familiar world. His words about God's love for the world flowed like honey, sweet and nourishing to the soul. The light has come into the world, he said, his voice as gentle as moonlight touching the sleeping city. The shadows in the room seemed to hold their own kind of peace now, not hiding, but rather embracing the truth being shared. The disciples, still present but respectfully distant, listened with quiet attention, their own understanding deepening like evening shadows lengthening across the ground. As the night grew deeper, a profound stillness settled over the room, the kind of quietness that comes when truth touches the heart. Nicodemus sat in peaceful contemplation, his scholar's mind gradually giving way to something deeper, more personal. The familiar weight of his religious learning felt different now, like a garment being gently reshaped by new understanding. Jesus spoke of love rather than judgment, of light rather than darkness, his words flowing like cool water in the desert night. He explained how God sent his Son not to condemn the world, but that through him the world might be saved. These words settled in the room like a gentle blessing, bringing comfort rather than condemnation. The oil lamps burned lower now, their flames steady and warm, creating an intimate circle of light around the two men. Outside, the sounds of Jerusalem at night provided a soft backdrop to their conversation. Distant dogs barking, the occasional call of a night bird, the whisper of wind through the narrow streets. Nicodemus found himself being drawn into a new way of seeing, like eyes adjusting to the darkness and finding beauty in the night. His questions came more slowly now, thoughtful pauses between each one, like the spaces between stars in the night sky. Each answer from Jesus seemed to illuminate another corner of understanding in his heart. The familiar scriptures that Nicodemus had studied all his life began to take on new meaning, like well-worn paths suddenly leading to unexpected vistas. Jesus spoke of Moses lifting up the serpent in the wilderness, connecting ancient truth to present hope. His words were like a gentle hand drawing back a curtain, revealing deeper meanings in long-known stories. As the first hint of dawn began to soften the eastern sky, Nicodemus prepared to return to his home. He rose slowly, as one carrying precious new treasure, his movements deliberate and thoughtful. The night's conversation had planted seeds in his heart that would continue to grow, like stars slowly revealing themselves in the evening sky. The streets of Jerusalem were still quiet as Nicodemus made his way home, but they seemed different now. Each shadow held possibility. Each breath of wind carried whispers of new life. The same stones that had felt the weight of his questioning footsteps earlier now felt the lighter touch of feet carrying hope. In the days and weeks that followed, Nicodemus would return to this conversation in his mind, like fingers running over smooth prayer beads. The words about being born again, about spirit moving like wind, about light and love rather than judgment, would surface in quiet moments of reflection. They would shape his actions in subtle ways, leading him to speak up for Jesus in the Sanhedrin, and later to bring spices for his burial. This nighttime conversation had changed something fundamental in his understanding, like water slowly reshaping stone. The truth he heard that night began to transform his heart. The mystery of faith no longer felt like a puzzle to be solved, but rather like a gentle wind to be experienced, a light to be followed. Years later, those who knew Nicodemus would notice a difference in him, a gentleness that had not been there before, a wisdom that went beyond scholarly knowledge. The teacher of Israel had become a student of a deeper truth, and his life bore quiet witness to the transformation that can come from a single night of honest seeking. As our story draws to a close, we too can rest in the peace of knowing that our questions are welcome in the quiet hours. Like Nicodemus, we may find that our deepest understanding comes not in moments of certainty, but in times of humble seeking. The same gentle truth that transformed his heart continues to work in our own, as constant as the stars and as tender as the night breeze.